Today is March 14th, 2003, and this is Carol Darlow. We're in the home of Lyle Mead in Roscommon, Michigan, for the purpose of he giving us the history of the Mead family. Lyle, I need you to give us a statement that this tape will belong to the Roscommon Area Historical Society.
Yes, definitely. I understand it's being recorded, and you have my permission.
Oh, okay. Well, let's start with the first generation of the Mead family that was in Roscommon.
The ones that I'm aware of are my grandmother and grandfather, which would be Miles Howard Mead Sr., and his wife, my grandmother, was Zadie Mae Mead, and her maiden name was Sult, S-U-L-T. And my grandmother raised me from a 7-year-old, and that was about 1947 that I went to live with her. But my knowledge of her being here and discussing things with her was that in the early 1900s, probably late 1898 or 99, they were in Findlay, Ohio. My grandmother got on a train to come up to Roscommon to visit her parents. I have no idea why her parents were here, how long they were here, and I'm only assuming that their name was Salt also. She got on a train, and my grandfather got on a train with her, and she said to him, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm going to go to Roscommon with you, and we're going to get married." And she said, "Okay." That's all I know about their courtship. And they came up here and got married and built a farm south of town about 4 miles on M18 with a stone porch on it, and raised 8 children. And
it's still there.
The farm is still there. The home is still there. Of course, it's grown up with trees. And my father was Carlyle Mead, being the youngest of the 8 children.
So what, did your grandfather earn a living just farming? That was his main occupation?
Well, no. He did farm, but his main occupation was a county clerk. He was quite involved in politics in Roscommon in the early 1900s and was county clerk for many, many years. And they had a small gas station in front of their farm, had a little building there, and they had a gas pump and sold gas. And I remember Graham saying it was a nickel a gallon, and they had a can on a bench that people just dropped their money in the can and helped themselves. Really? And then, of course, they raised crops and for their own need. I don't know if they sold any, but he bought a lot of property.
Did you ever know, did he get that property from the state, or you don't know if he bought that?
How he acquired that, I don't know, from whether it was tax sales or just purchased it from other people, but I know at one time that he was buying property on Higgins Lake shoreline for 10 cents a foot. And I asked him one time why he didn't buy more of it, and he said, because you can't raise a garden on there and you can't feed the cows, so why would you want property on the water, you know? And
how much acreage did he have then where they built that?
It was about 240 acres out there, yeah. A big farm,
Big
yeah. Uncle Squire and Uncle Russell bought that later on and farmed that in the 50s, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get back to your grandparents. What was their lifespan about? You know, when was he born?
Yeah, I sure do. Miles H. Mead Sr. was born May 1st. Oops, that's his death. Just a minute, let me back up here.
Oh, here's the birthplace.
Yeah. Well, where's that paper I had? I've got it right down to the bottom. Yeah, Miles was born November 26, 1878. Died May 1st, 1959. And they're buried here in Roscommon. Zadie Mae, my grandmother, was born June 21st, 1876. Died June 11th, 1960.
Well, she had a nice long life.
Yeah, she was 83. Just not quite. She'd have been 84 another couple weeks when she passed away. And
And you don't know anything more about her parents?
I don't know
They were here.
not one thing did we ever discuss about her parents or I know my grandfather had a brother down in Findlay, Ohio. His name was Carl Mead, and that's all I know. And
She never talked about sisters or brothers?
no, well, she had a sister.
Still back in Ohio, too?
She had a sister that I went to visit one time down in Glean, Michigan. And
Celine?
no, Glean, G-A-L-I-E-N, Glean. It's near Three Oaks.
Oh.
It's right on the border of Indiana down there. Avie. Her name was Avie, A-V-I-E, Avie Decker, D-E-C-K-E-R, and she had a couple of children down there. But again, that family was so far from us that I didn't know much about her. I just went to visit her one time, and
Well, at least you're aware that she had a sister.
oh yes, yeah. But where their parents were and whatnot, I've got a picture of them I can show you. But Grandpa Mead told me one time, or Grandma told me that when she married Grandpa, him and his brother Carl had several hundred acres out in Coffeyville, Oklahoma. And they wanted to go out there and farm that, and Grandma didn't want to go. She wanted to stay here, so they sold that property, and years later there was maybe over 100 producing oil wells drilled on that property. And just south of the old farmhouse here on M18 and to the east, so as you're going toward Prudenville, it would be on the left side of the road. He had a bunch of property down in there, and they drilled for oil back in, I don't know, the 20s or 30s, and they hit gas, and they thought, what the devil are we going to do with this? So they capped it, and they've never drilled again. So somewhere back in the woods there's a capped well. I don't know where it is, but it's back there.
Oh my goodness.
With a pipe in the ground, and it was gas that they hit.
For heaven's sake.
So that was a little bit of trivia that was kind of neat. And they owned property between here and St. Helen, several hundred acres, and sold it off in years later.
Well, they lived here a long time.
Yeah, and he just bought and sold, yeah. And they built a tavern in Roscommon called the Tavern of the Town.
Okay. Did they build it themselves?
Physically, I don't know whether they had it built or hired it, but it was quite a big building with a dance floor, and it's still there. And
did they run it then?
oh yes,
As a tavern in town?
they ran it. They just had a beer license.
Was that while he was still county clerk?
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
And did she work in there too?
Oh yes, oh yeah,
Oh, okay.
oh sure. And then they had cabins, night cabins out in back of the tavern, and some of the buildings are still there that they rented out by the week, overnight and whatnot, and people stayed. Later years, when I was a small child, I lived back there in one of them, and she rented out to people who lived there year-round. So,
They were very enterprising.
oh yeah, very enterprising
What
people.
year did they get married? Do you know that?
Yes, I do, by golly. Married November 9th, 1899. So that was when they got on a train and came north in 1899. And then their first child, Edith, was born in 1901. So that follows right in line with coming up here and staying. And all the children were born right up here. So they had 8. 3 boys.
Let's list them in the order of their birth.
Edith was born in 1901. Do you want the exact date?
Sure.
January 19, 1901. Zelma was born May 25th, 1902. Carlton Russell Sr., who we referred to fondly as Uncle Rut, was born July 2nd, 1904. Squire Mead was born April 10, 1906. Miles H. Mead Jr., who we referred to as Uncle Chum, was born December 8, 1907. William Vincent Mead, who we referred to as Uncle Abe, was born September 14, 1909. Virginia was born May 6, 1915, and my father, Carlisle Mead Sr., was born September 30, 1918. These people have all passed
So,
away.
Yeah, so she had children from 1901 to 1918.
And then in 1947, she took me on.
She took you
She was
on.
in her 60s when she took me. Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
Well, you were a lucky man, lucky boy.
Yes, I was. She was a very fine woman.
By that time, were they still running the tavern in the town?
No, they had sold it several
So that was
years.
something like from the 30s and 40s?
Yeah, it was
Or
before.
early 40s?
Yeah, before my time. I don't remember them ever owning that.
Hmm.
I just remember her saying she's glad she sold it.
Oh, I guess that was a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's, so, have we told everything about Miles? He was county clerk for like, how many years do we know exactly?
Oh,
Just a long time.
20, 25 years. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Just
Yeah,
a long.
We'll probably have a record of that somewhere.
Yeah.
Because he lived to be an elderly gentleman also.
He was a couple years younger than my grandmother, but he died in '59, just a year before she did. So he, you know, he was 80 or 81. Yeah. Yeah.
So by the time you were living with them, what was he doing then?
He was just living there in the house behind the tavern of the town with us. And then he had a mental problem, and he ended up at the state mental ward over in Traverse City for many, many years.
Oh.
See, I come to live with my grandmother in 1947, and from 1947 until he died over there in Traverse City.
So he wasn't there all the time that you were there?
No, just her. Yeah,
Oh.
he'd come once in a while. They'd bring him home for a visit, but he would go back. His politics just drove him up a tree or the wrong way or something. I don't know. I know a little bit about what happened, but it's history, and
Yeah, you don't need to believe it.
no.
Well, that was, although, when you think about it, that was not an uncommon thing in those years.
Yeah.
That people were taken care of at Traverse City. That's just what you
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
It was probably your only choice.
Now they would never do that because they got medication, and
Right.
and
Yeah, it's all
he'd have
changed.
been fine.
Sure.
A little Prozac, and he'd have been okay.
Yeah, when you think about it, it's too bad.
Yeah,
isn't
it is. Yeah.
A lot of years wasted. Okay, well, let's kind of go through the children then. Edith married.
John McGillis.
Okay, and she stayed here then.
Yes, the McGillis family is, they're prominent in this area, related to the Petersons, and I don't know who all.
Yeah, probably a lot.
Yeah, Richardsons, Petersons, and they
How
had
many children did they have?
they had 4. They had 2 boys and 2 girls.
Okay.
They lived here. Jack McGillis and Mike McGillis. They call him Dally.
And
Dorothy Jane Lamar is a daughter. She's still here, and Isla Mae did live here until about 1949 or 50, and then her and her husband moved down to Detroit and lived down there, and she's still there. Zelma married Lee Myers, and they had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and they lived mostly in Ohio, down by Oregon, Ohio, Toledo, in that area, Millbury, Ohio. But they were up here quite a bit. They had a cottage at Higgins Lake, and he was a mailman. Worked on the railroad for the mail department. Russell Sr., Uncle Russell, he had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And the 3 boys have been here all their lives. Larry, Carlton, and Lauren. Connie just moved back. They had 3 boys and 1 girl.
What did he do for a living?
He was a county road commission supervisor or foreman. He worked for the county road for a lot of years. And then his son, Carlton Jr., worked there and has recently retired. And then Carlton's son, Rusty, worked there for a while. But
Oh, really?
I don't know if Rusty's still there or not. I think he might have went somewhere else. Squire had 2 children, 1 boy and a girl. And he was the...
Who did he marry?
He married Edna Fry,
Okay.
and although Squires passed away a few years ago, I don't know the exact date, but he died here in Roscommon. He was the school bus mechanic for many years. He owned, he built Werfel's gas station, started that many years ago, and then sold that to Werfel's when I was a little kid.
So he was the original?
Yeah, he was the original owner of Werfel's gas station. Yeah, and he was on...
He was in politics.
Politics. He was in the mayor for a while of Roscommon. He was, I don't know if he was a supervisor or a commissioner. He was involved in politics real heavy, and always worked for the good of the village and whatnot. Then Vincent Mead had just 2 boys. He had married Ev Ballou, I'm sorry, that was her later name, Ev Preston. And she had 2 boys, Doug and Bill Mead. And then, of course, they divorced, and she later married Bernie Blue. But he was a barber, cut hair in town for a while, and a little bit of everything. He was kind of the black sheep of the family. Bounced around, married several times, but wasn't the pride of my grandmother. Virginia, Aunt Jin, we called her Aunt Jin, and she married Edward Good. Edward Good was a MP manager for many, many years, and he traveled around. He was in Ludington for a while, and then Blissfield, and they moved as he got transferred from store to store and made his promotions. And he had 2 boys, Gary and David. They're still down in southern Michigan in that area. And Carlisle S. Mead Sr., my father, married Grace Stevens, was his first wife, and my mother, she was from Mile. She come over here to work in the hotel, making beds and whatnot, and met my dad, and they got married, and they had 2 boys. Well, I had a brother that was stillborn a year ahead of me, and then I was born. Then I had 2 sisters after me. My 2 sisters are living, one in Florida and one down by Lapeer. And I've been around Roscommon pretty much most of my life. But
so when you counted the 2 boys, were you counting the stillborn?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
My dad remarried about 30 years ago, or no more than that, 40 years ago. He remarried a very wonderful lady down in Troy, Michigan, and they had a son. So I've got a half brother. So that would be his 2 and 2, 2 boys, 2 girls. And my father passed away in 1999. And
so where did he stay here too?
no, he lived in Troy. He
went down to Troy.
Yeah, my dad was he spent many years in the service, Second World War and the Korean War, and then he contracted arthritis real bad overseas, and in the mud and the cold and whatnot, and he ended up on a little bit of a disability from the Army, but drove a ready-mix cement truck down for Troy Ready Mix for 25 or 30 years, and retired from the Teamsters Union down there.
Oh.
So
are you the only one that was brought up by your grandmother?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're just special.
Well, it was either that or sleep in a barn somewhere.
Oh.
Yeah, she took me in. My parents were kind of wild, young people that weren't settled much like you have today, and kids were in the way, and she kept dropping me, and my mother kept dropping me off and picking me up and dropping me off and picking me up after 2 or 3 weeks, and I didn't want to live with my mother, so my grandmother said, well, you can just stay right here. And when my mother come to get me, she said, Graham says, you're not going to take him. And there was a little discussion about it, but Graham won out, so
well, sure. Well,
thank
heaven.
heaven.
That's a good thing.
Yeah,
Sure.
and
well, sure. Okay, where are we at? We were at Carlisle,
Yeah,
and he's the youngest one, so we
Yes.
covered all the children.
All the
of
8 children.
Miles and Zadie.
yes.
Okay, well, now let's find out what you remember about growing up in Roscommon.
Rough.
In what way?
It was great. I'm just kidding you. It was, we were all poor and we didn't know it. It was just,
It didn't matter, did it?
it didn't matter, no.
Yeah.
The only thing I thought, the rich kids had a bathroom and I had an outdoor bathroom.
That was the only difference.
Yeah, that was the only difference, yeah. Everybody that had an indoor bathroom I thought was rich. No, we played.
You all went to the same school and everything.
Well, I went to, yeah, right where the, what do you call it now, the craft center was our school, high school, from kindergarten through the 12th grade, and we had not much TV.
All your school, you went in that one building.
Yeah,
Isn't that wonderful?
yeah, oh yeah. And you knew everybody in the kindergarten through the 12th grade all the time, and
Like how big of a class did you?
we had 36 in our class, I believe,
When
yeah.
you graduated.
Yeah, yeah. It's just, you didn't have TV. Of course, you couldn't get it until the mid-50s. Cadillac TV station was snowy. People that had an outside antenna, you couldn't see much, but
But you
So
grew
we
up in
played-
the 40s. You were born in 39, you said?
yeah, 39. I came here in like
You don't
40.
remember much of the war then, do you?
Second World War, I remember my dad going and crying when he left, but then he went in the Korean War too when I was about 12. And he left here. I can show you pictures of him leaving, but we,
How many of those Mead boys went to the World War II? Was your dad the only one? that
no, Abe,
Abe went
William
also?
Vincent, yeah, he was in the Army. The rest of them never.
went? So the two younger ones went?
Yep. Yeah, but you know, my father didn't go overseas until Korean War. He didn't in the Second World War. As far as I know, he didn't go overseas. I do know he was in Korea, and saw some action there. But William Vincent Mead, I don't think went overseas either. So they were fortunate not to be in any battles. But no, our life was pretty neat. We'd play hide and go seek and kick the can, and just the kids. Ice skating in the wintertime was a big thing. Never heard of hockey. That was, we didn't have hockey here, but ice rink started.
your ice rink?
Well, it started, the first ice rink was right where the gymnasium is, where the craft center,
Yeah.
where the gymnasium.
part of it.
Yeah, that was new in 1956. I played my
So prior to
basketball in 56 and 57. So prior to that, that was just a big playground where we played softball, and then in the wintertime they flooded that and made an ice rink out of it.
Oh.
And Squire was involved in that most
So
of
the
the time.
school did that or the town did that?
The city, village,
Village probably
yeah.
did
Just Teddy Wallace, who worked for the village, was flooding it, and Squire would work on it. Well, then when they built the gymnasium there, then they went up on the hill behind Jim Mahoney's, where
Oh,
the
okay, where the tennis courts are now?
tennis courts are now. They had a big rink there, and we skated there. And that's right close to where Squire lived, and he'd go over and flood it. Every night when you're done skating, they'd come out at midnight and flood that rink and make it nice and smooth, yeah, for the next
So
day.
everyone did adults ski a lot too, or skate, or was it mostly the kids?
Mostly children, yeah. I didn't see too many adults. Once in a while you would, but not too much. You
Nobody's
just
serving you hot chocolate, huh?
no, there was no warming house, no. I mean, sometimes we could build a fire out there, but that was a rarity too, to have a fire and keep warm. You just skated until your ankles were twisted, and then you crawled home. But everybody was there. It was just something to do.
It's a fun thing.
And then through high school, of course, we did different things, sports and softball and whatnot. But
So were you involved in the sports?
Oh,
Did
yeah.
you like all that?
oh yeah, football, basketball, baseball. Yeah. Earl Haight was the coach, and he was a big influence. Earl Haight was a big influence on a lot of people's lives, good or bad. he was good. I left town in 1960. I got married in 1960 and left here in 61 and was
Well,
gone.
let's hear about who you married.
I married Merida Stillwagon from Grayling. That was Jim Granlund's fault. He took me for a ride up to Grayling and went through the parking lot at the hospital. And no, she was working in the hospital about 8 o'clock one night. She was typing, and I said, "Whoa, hold it. I got to go in there." So we went in and tried to get her to go with us, and of course she was smart enough not to. But later on.
That was the beginning, huh?
Yeah, later on I met her downtown and set up an appointment. And,
the proper way, huh?
yeah, the proper way.
Well,
And
good.
yeah, we're still together.
And you have how many children?
Three girls, yeah.
3 girls you raised.
7 grandchildren. And
But you moved away, you raised your children elsewhere.
yes, I raised my children in Alpena. We were over there for 16 years. We were in Gaylord 12 years, but we were in Gaylord from 61 through 63. And then I got transferred to Alpena in 1963 and was there for 16 years and moved back to Gaylord in 79 and was there until 88. And then I decided to move down here because it was more comfortable. And
Well, great. Well, we're glad you're here.
well, I'm glad to be here. It's been fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've worked as an insurance adjuster, handling claims for 42 years. Should retire, but haven't.
You must have a big area? Or what-
10 counties. I have 10 counties. Yeah, today I was in Standish in
Oh.
20 because I knew I was going to meet with you, so I
Yeah.
came back. Took Vern Myers with me. He rode along just for the ride because he's retired. And
Neat. Okay, we're underway again. Where were we? Let me see. We were with your family, your children and grandchildren, and where you had lived. Okay, let's get back a little bit more to your growing up years.
Mhm.
Were you affiliated with a church here?
Congregational church.
Congregational church?
Mrs. Haltz was my Sunday school teacher. Mrs. E.L. Haltz was a big influence on my life. I loved her dearly, but she she passed away, but I don't know when. She did it after I moved away.
Yeah. She worked
Her-
at the village shop when I knew
Yeah,
her.
yeah. She worked in a village shop, and I think she did when she was teaching Sunday school. Very good with children, very, very good. She was E.L. Haltz's wife, the
Was she
superintendent.
a teacher?
No.
Not.
I think she worked at the village shop for forever.
Did she?
Yeah. Just a nice person.
Yeah, you spoke about Mr. Haight. What were some of the other teachers that you remember?
Larry Easley. Larry Easley is still here. He's retired, still lives in Roscommon. Have coffee with him most every day.
Where did he teach?
He taught civics and history. Miss Cross was here. If I could get my yearbook out, I could show you a whole bunch of teachers. But Ralph Osling was one of my shop teachers.
That's why you can make such nice cabinets.
Yeah. Ralph, who was the history teacher, government? Clyde Schultz.
Oh.
Clyde Schultz was a high school teacher.
Who was your teacher in elementary school? Remember those
Oh
teachers?
boy, yeah. Judy Cornett's mother was, she never taught me. I had Mrs. Greaves was a 6th grade
May
teacher.
Greaves.
May Greaves, a 6th grade teacher. 7th and 8th grade is Dale Beery. He was a 8th grade teacher, I think. Yeah, can't remember. But he was a bomber pilot in the Second World War. He got shot down. He used to tell us stories about, he was in the concentration camps. Tell us stories about that.
Well, that was wonderful that he told
Oh
us.
yeah, if we were good, he'd take a half-hour a day and tell us a continuing story that lasted the whole year. From every day, it seemed like where he was at, and as long as you were good. If you weren't good, then you didn't get to hear that that segment. But it
And the
was,
children wanted to hear that.
oh yeah, you could just picture him marching and walking and telling you his troubles.
What
And
was his last name?
Dale Beery, B-E-R-R-Y. When he'd talk, tears would just run down his face. And just he's a little short guy, but he was a pilot, and he had an airplane here in an apple orchard. He was around here for a lot of years, and then ended up in Traverse City. Going backwards to like the 7th grade, Sandy Silsby. Yeah, Sandy Silsby was our 7th grade teacher. He was, in fact, he was a childhood friend of my father. They played together out there in Silsby Farm in somewhere, I don't know where it was, but Roseland Farm, the Silsby Farm, my gosh, there was all kinds of names out there for those places. And then 6th grade was Mrs. Greaves. In the 5th grade was Richmond, Mrs. Richmond. They lived over where Dr. Ballard lived, next door to Ballard's, if you know where that is. I guess you don't. Behind the Catholic Church. Yeah.
Near Walls Park.
Yeah, that's where the Richmonds lived. Then going back to the 4th grade was Mrs. Parliament, big heavy-set gal that tried to sneak up from behind and she'd squeak the floors. Can't remember my 3rd grade teacher, but it seems like it was Mrs. Hart, but I may be wrong. But the 2nd grade was Mrs. Dinwiddie, a little elderly lady that was just a sweetheart and just loved kids. And people who I talked to that are my age can remember her.
Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Dinwiddie, yeah. Kindergarten, I think I was probably over in Mayo. 2nd grade is when I was 7 years old, and I was 2nd grade on. But I think I spent kindergarten and the 1st grade in the Mayo area, and I went to school over there. But that's where I was born, is in Mayo. But other than that, it's a good town, as you well know, to live in. And I lived in Alpena for 16 years, and I always thought back to Roscommon. And I went to Gaylord, moved to Gaylord, and it isn't a bad town, but it just wasn't Roscommon, you know. Somebody says, why do you want to move to Roscommon? There's nothing there. And I said, exactly. That's why I'm going. In fact, they got 2 stoplights down. I'm upset about the second one. So.
Well, when you were in sports in high school, did you, like when you were on the baseball team, did you travel to the other schools for games and all that?
Football, basketball. Oh yeah, we traveled all over.
And you were in
school
all
bus.
sports?
Oh yeah.
Did you go to college then?
No, I didn't. I was offered a college scholarship at Mount Pleasant. The coach even came up and talked to me about a football scholarship, but I had joined the Navy, and I had not prepared myself for college subjects in school. We didn't have counselors to say, well, you should take this, this, or this. You either took college prep or you took general courses. I took general courses to get out of there. I've often wished I would have went to college, but I couldn't afford to cut and pay, so I'm glad I didn't go. My daughters went to college. She's a teacher here in Roscommon, Shannon, and teaches 3rd grade at St. Helen. But she's the only one of my children that went to college. We tried to get them all to go. My wife did not go to college. You just had to go to work, had to make a living.
It was a different
we were poor and had bills to pay, and there was just no money to go to college. If I wanted a car, I had to buy it. If I wanted a bicycle, I had to go out and mow lawns, and we'd go out at night and pick up night crawlers and sell them for a penny a piece. And
who'd you sell them to?
Well, my Uncle Russell had a little bait shop, and I'd sell them to him, and then he got 35 cents a dozen. He had a sign out in front of his house, bait, and people would stop, and we'd pick arbutus and sell them for 50 cents a bouquet. And I bought bicycles and rifles and set pins in a bowling alley and made $7 a week, and I had lots of money and bought a car, 47
Where was the
Ford.
bowling alley?
It's a Fred's bar. Fred's.
So who were you working for?
Al Shervin. Al Shervin owned it then. He built it. Al Shervin built a bowling alley. It was Bob's Tavern back in the 50s. And then Bob, whoever, sold it to Freddie Martindale, elderly Fred Martindale, and Fred Sr.
As I understand that the bowling alley's in the village limits and the other part is not.
Is not, is that right? I've heard something to that effect, yeah. But we had manual pin spotters, and that's how we made, the kids made some.
That was a good part-time job for you when you were in high school. Then.
Yeah, it's about the only thing going in the wintertime. You know, they didn't have McDonald's and they didn't have anything going around here, ski parks or anything like that. So you just hustled
Now,
where
the
you could.
Pioneer Hill deal
Mhm.
was not there when you were
Yes.
growing up? Oh,
Yeah.
it was?
Pioneer, it had a rope tows, and we skied. That's where I learned to ski.
Oh, okay.
And I left there and went up to Boyne Mountain, and I took National Ski Patrol. I was on the National Ski Patrol for many years, went out west skiing.
Well, see, you had some quite adventures.
Oh,
there.
yeah, I instructed, yeah.
Did you
I was
really?
taught martial arts to pilots and co-pilots at Wordsmith Air Force Base, hand-to-hand combat and jungle survival.
Where'd you learn that?
Studying under a second-degree black belt from Wordsmith. And,
Oh, really?
yeah.
When you lived in Alpena?
mm-hmm.
For heaven's sake.
I used to teach self-defense to women who. No,
At Wordsmith also?
No, I did
Oh.
that in Alpena. I taught
yeah.
classes at the school,
Mhm.
evening classes in adult education, and
Oh.
there and over to Hillman,
For
over
heaven's
there.
sake.
And,
How much did your family spend time at Higgins Lake?
just I mean, recreation type thing.
Like, did you go out in the summertime? Were you out there frequently, or?
As kids, we'd ride our bicycle, hitchhike out and go swimming and come back. The family never went. I don't. You mean my grandmother?
Yeah.
Never go out there. No.
But you kids went out on your bikes. So where did
Yeah.
you just go right? Did you go out to Gary's Park, or where?
We used to go out to Gary's Park. Earl Haight used to take a school bus out there during the summer. They call it summer recreation, and we could ride out on the school bus and
Spend the day?
spend the day or hours or whatever. There was a certain time you could go out there, and he did that a lot. So he kept kids busy that way. And then he'd open a gymnasium. You go in there, and they'd play basketball or different little games that he would have to
In the
keep kids.
summertime?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
I'm not sure he got paid for that. I think he might have did a lot of that on his own time. But he did have a school bus available to him to take us out to the Gary's Park. But we'd ride like out to the cut and or hitchhike. Get a ride out there and then swim most of the day and then hitchhike back.
So you taught yourself to swim.
Oh, yeah, you didn't.
So who did you hang out with mostly now? Did you have cousins that you were with most of
Yeah.
the time?
Larry Mead, Lauren Mead, later
They're all
years.
the same age, kind of, right?
Pretty much. Larry's 2 or 3 years older. He's a barber here in town. Lauren's in town. He's a year younger or so.
And Bob and Nancy must have grown up in town.
Yeah, but Bob was 5, 6 years older, so he was a big kid. He was doing other things like Korean War. He'd gone to war and whatnot. And Nancy was quite a studious person. She stayed home mostly with her mom and never saw much of her unless they were outside. But we hung around. We had our friends that we still do. We still get together.
Sure, that's great. That's great. Well, you had a good upbringing here with your grandmother then.
She was very much, I never wanted to do anything to embarrass her, and I never did. So I stayed away from drugs and booze and tobacco and anything else that would upset her. And consequently, it helped me, too.
Sure, well, sure. It's good to have good standards.
Oh, yeah, good.
Very good. Well, you talked about having bicycles. Did your grandmother have a car?
No.
No.
No, I had a bicycle because I saved the money and, well, you'd go out and dig angleworms or pick night crawlers. And the hardware down here was Ingelson's Hardware. And I bought a Schwinn bicycle in the early 50s, probably about 1952 or 3. And Bill Ingelson let me put $5 down and bring a couple bucks in whenever I had it and paid on it. So that's how I got my bicycle. And I bought a lawnmower from him, a push lawnmower, because I was mowing lawns for a dollar a lawn, and he let me do the same thing, is buy it and pay so much down. And
That's what's nice about small towns.
Yeah.
That's neat. Where was his?
Ingelson's Hardware is where Bradley's mattress store is right now.
Oh, okay, Bradley's Furniture. Okay. Great. Well, did you ever take the trains from here?
No.
No?
No, we saw the trains come and go, but never.
By that time, were they still passenger trains when you were growing up?
Not too many. No, they're mostly freight trains.
Mostly freight
Yeah, they had snow trains in early years that went to Grayling and stuff.
Bringing people up on the weekends?
Like
you mean?
Detroit, from Detroit and Flint, and bring them up to Grayling and stay the weekend and take them back. They called them snow trains. Saw very few passenger trains. I don't recall any, but there might have been some.
The depot was still here when
Oh,
you were
yes.
growing up.
Oh, yeah.
What can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we did a lot of playing around the depot, climbing
Did
on the
you?
roof. Oh, yeah, we were over
Climbing
there.
on the roof?
Oh, sure, jump from building to building on the roofs. And,
Oh, no kidding. That was
yeah.
dangerous.
Oh, well, when you climbed the water tower, that was dangerous, but we
Oh,
did.
you did that too?
Oh, yeah, you got to climb
Did
the
you?
water tower. You were
geez. I'm so sheltered.
Yeah. Well, we turn the recording off, and I'll tell you a lot of things that
Just tell us about climbing the water tower. Now, how often did you do that?
Once.
Once in your lifetime. Okay, like we were like 10 or 12 or what?
Well, I don't know how old.
You remember it very well, though.
Yeah, so I had to climb it once in later years because I worked for Jansen's Plumbing and Heating. When I got out of high school, I went to work for Jansen's and for 4 years, and we had to climb the water tower and put a safety device in it because the water run constantly, and if the town didn't use it, then it overflowed and down on the tracks and the railroad tracks there. It just made a mess.
And the tower you're talking about
What's right?
located where the one we have now is,
Yeah.
but it's the one previous to the one.
Oh, it was just an old wood water tower, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And we went up on the roof and went down inside and built a platform to put this electronic device that when the water come up and touched it, the pump shut off so that it didn't overflow. Well, so there's really twice that I climbed the water tower, and believe me, I never did it again. That was too high.
Too high.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. But, yeah, we played around the
Well, how
railroad
many
depot.
buildings were at the depot?
There was
Did you
a,
jump from one building to
yeah, there was a couple. The roofs were different levels, maybe.
Oh.
And I remember jumping from one roof to another, but there was a baggage, a storage area where they ran the baggage carts up, and they had a storage area, and then they had the office or where you went in and bought your tickets and stuff. So there was kind of like two buildings there,
But
and
they
the
were
roofs were only
together.
about 3 or 4 feet
Oh,
apart.
they were separate buildings.
I remember the roofs being apart, so they had to be separate
Sure.
buildings. Yeah, I was.
I don't picture another building behind it. But so the one you jumped onto from the main building was farther north?
Well, or west.
Northwest,
Yeah,
what do
yeah.
you call that?
There was this baggage building was to the west, and then the office was.
The main.
Yeah,
the main
it was
building.
more where you went in and bought your tickets and stuff. But that was all boarded up, as I recall, when I was a kid. They didn't use that. The baggage building they used for storage and stuff. I remember freight trains stopping there. They had these.
You mean the main depot was boarded up already? When you were a
Yeah,
kid?
yeah.
Oh.
But there was like a storage area where they brought in supplies and stuff, and they brought in train loads of lumber and stuff, and they'd park them on the side tracks where you go and unload the lumber cars.
Oh, okay.
And I remember them taking baggage because they were big wagons with iron wheels with a great big tongue on them. I
Like
mean,
that one we had by the Galmer House? Because that's from the depot.
okay, we take those and run them around town. I think
You had a good time.
I think one ended up on top of the school one time. We took it apart and run it up there. I don't remember doing that, but I remember it being there. I don't know who did that.
You do too.
No, I really
Oh,
don't.
you don't know who
No.
did it.
They had a hard time getting it down. I remember that.
Oh, my gosh. Well, somebody put some effort into it.
Yeah, but those older kids did
They
that.
must. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, well, they had outhouses downtown on the street corners. We had a cop in town named Spike Jones, city police. He was a retired Detroit city cop.
Well, that wasn't his real name. That's what you called him. What was his real name?
You know, we called him Spike. His last name was Jones. I don't know what his real name was, but he had his little blue uniform on, and we brought an outhouse down and put it on the street corner and put Spike's office on it, so he had a place to be.
How long did it stay there?
Oh, about overnight, you know. It was a Halloween prank, you know.
Why, sure. Oh, tell us more about what you did.
No.
Oh, golly. Well, what other interesting things of long ago days of growing up can you tell us?
Well, right there by the water tower, there was a little house, and a guy had a orchard there, and he was always yelling at everybody for taking his apples. And during Halloween time, they kind of tipped over his outhouse. So one Halloween, he got inside, and with a shotgun, he was going to
He was waiting for you.
waiting for you. So the guys took a rope and wrapped it around the door and trapped him inside, and then tied the rope to the train. When the train took off, it pulled that outhouse down the tracks with him hollering and yelling.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, well,
How did that end up?
I don't know.
that's fun.
You had to leave the area to get away from that. But just something crazy.
Well, sure. Well, those are fun.
That's
Fun
why.
for everyone, but yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it was a good idea to
Should not be there.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, can you think of, when did you get your first car then?
I got, let's see, I bought a 1947 Ford. I was probably 1956. I was probably
you were
60.
still here
I
and
was
still in
60.
school.
Yeah, I was set in the bowling alley and paid $75 for the car, and it cost me $150 to rebuild the engine. Ford garage, it was right there where the tire company is now, across from the Dairy Queen.
Ken's Tires?
Ken's Tire, yeah, that was a Ford garage, and Frank Bertle and Herman Bertle. No, Herman Bertle worked Chevrolet garage, but Frank Bertle rebuilt my engine for me, 6-cylinder, $175. It took me forever to pay for that. Second car,
You were still in high school.
Oh,
when
yeah,
you-
yeah.
So you had a car in high school?
Oh, yeah. I bought it and paid for it, yeah, I had a car. But see, when I was probably in the 10th grade, my grandmother had sugar diabetes, and when I was 7 years old, I started giving her NPHU 40 insulin shots when I was 7.
kidding.
She had to have a shot every day. And on Sunday, she took 2 shots. One was for blood and one for insulin. And she died when I was 21. But when I was in the 10th grade, she had a sore on her toe, and it didn't heal, and gangrene set in and went up her knee. And we had her knee, Dr. Marzocca was here, and Dr. Marzocca cut her leg off above her knee. And I had her through my 10th, 11th, and 12th grade year that I took care of her. And then I had her until I was 21 because she had 8 kids and none of them could take her until the last 6 months before she died. Then she went to live with Uncle Squire for a couple of months, and then Uncle Russell took her for a couple of months. Then she passed away, but I used to
So
take
you
her.
took care of her.
Oh,
and-
yeah.
And it was still in her home, which was where?
Behind the
Still behind.
Werfel's gas station there, one of those houses, and we lived there, and I'd come home at noon and fix her lunch, fix her breakfast before I left, and then come home at night, fix supper, and I had an aunt. Aunt Edith would come and give her a bath. I didn't do any of that, but they give her a bath, a sponge bath, because we didn't have, well, we had a shower, but she couldn't
Was she
stand.
ever able to walk with crutches?
No,
after that?
no, she was too heavy. She was a very heavy
So
person.
She was bedridden after the amputation.
Yeah, she was probably, let's see, 10th, 3. She's probably 6 or 7 years without that leg. So she was like 76 or 77, very heavy lady, and didn't have the strength to walk with. So she was bedridden. But to take her somewhere, I just pick her up and put her in my car and take her for a ride,
You did.
and then bring her back. Yeah, and that's another reason I didn't go to college. Mainly is because I had her to take care of. But I did join the Navy, and I spent some time in the Navy, and
Was that after she died then?
pretty much, yeah,
You went to the
yeah,
Navy?
yeah. But she died in 1960, but I had joined the Naval Reserves in 1956 and spent 6 years in active duty in the reserves, so I didn't have to go anywhere. It was peacetime. It was between Korea
Sure.
and Vietnam, so we were never called up. But she she did fine, you know, with the one leg, and I bought her a TV set, and black and white. She couldn't see it. She was pretty much blind, but I put a switch in the cord. So I'd set the station and the volume, and she'd flip that switch on, and it'd come on, and she'd have something. I had a radio, yeah,
Sure.
had the TV, and then we had a radio with the same thing. She couldn't see to set the station, but if I set the station to her programs that she liked to listen to, then she could turn it on and off.
Oh, great.
And so, you know, she had a very good life, and
Sure.
so did I. But I could go and come back, you know, in the evening and make sure she was all right and make sure I was home at
Yeah.
a decent time and not stay out all night. But it worked out fine, and
Well, sure.
I have no regrets whatsoever.
Well, you were a faithful grandson.
And, you know,
She had raised
she
you, so-
was my mother, and that was
Sure.
you wouldn't think of doing anything else.
That's right, right. You don't even think that there's a choice, you just know that's what
Yeah.
you're doing. Well, that's neat. Okay, I think we've covered your school years. Did any of the teams that you were on in high school win any championships or anything that you want to tell us about?
Well, yeah.
What did you do?
Good. We had good basketball teams, and nothing spectacular in football. But I remember one year we only lost one basketball game, won our districts and whatnot, but lost the regionals. And my wife was a cheerleader for Grayling, and her team beat us and went on to state championship. They took runner-up in the state championship.
Okay.
That's been a tough thing to
live
deal
with
with for all these years. But we had a lot of good basketball teams. You go to the basketball game in those days, and you stood up and watched. I mean, every seat was taken, every standing room there was. You couldn't even, you know, you had to hardly get in a door if you weren't there to see the JV
The
team.
town really supported.
Oh yeah, yeah. But again, there was no TV, and we had some good teams, and we were winning games, and people liked to watch a winner.
Sure.
And we had a lot of tall kids that.
Who were the other people on your basketball team?
Well, my senior year was Jim Granlund and Lauren Mead, myself, Keith Hanna, Rick Fradel was there, Jim Pappenfuss was there, and prior to that, I played with Bob Murphy and Vern Myers, Dave Doherty. Dave Doherty was a fantastic athlete. He'd jump, man, and he'd jump for a rebound. All I could see is his tennis shoes. I mean, he would be so high.
No kidding.
And you'd never know that today, but he's still a very nice person, but
Yeah.
his knees have given him bad time from all the running. He was a very, very fast runner,
Really?
and he used to chase rabbits. And the only reason he didn't catch it was because a rabbit would turn right or turn left and jog around. But Dave was fast, and it was something to watch. And Vern Myers was a good athlete, and Bob Murphy, and it was just, and no, we still get together, and it's still fun. Yeah.
So you're still here. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, you think we've covered it pretty well?
No, I think so. You've got a lot more than I thought I would remember.
Yeah, you did very well. And the information from the Bible here on the deaths and marriages and births is excellent too.
Yes.
And this is in your grandfather's handwriting, right?
Most of it is. Some of it, like here, I don't recognize who wrote that in there.
But this fancier is his.
Oh, this is his. There's records at the courthouse that he wrote in because they didn't have computers, and it's all in
Try
his.
and get the years that he was a clerk.
Jim Rutledge was very good at that, and Jim has told me that Jim being a local attorney, said that he has seen much of his handwriting, and it was just beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and it is. It's, and he could remember things that were just phenomenal. He kept everything in his head. I wish he had like a photographic memory, and I wish I had that, but I don't. And I think that was some of his mental problems. Remember too much.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much
Okay.
for sharing the Mead family history with us, and we appreciate your time and your good memory.
Wish I could remember more, but
Thanks a lot.
okay.
Okay.
Let me.
Anything else?
No.
Okay.